9 dead in Taiwan's strongest quake in decades. NATO urged to ensure Ukraine arms flow. Hello, good afternoon. You're watching World Today with me, Shuhaida Arifin. At least 9 people were killed and more than 1,000 injured yesterday by a powerful earthquake in Taiwan that damaged dozens of buildings and prompted tsunami warnings as far as Japan and the Philippines before being lifted. Dozens of people were believed safe but unreachable in areas cut off by massive landslides triggered by the quake, many in tunnels that cut through the mountains that bisected the land from north to south. Officials said the quake was the strongest to shake the island in 25 years, while warnings of more tremors in the days ahead. Strict building regulations and widespread public disaster awareness appear to have staved off a major catastrophe for the earthquake-prone island, which lies near the junction of 2 tectonic plates. Director of Taipei's Central Weather Administration Seismology Center, Wu Qianfu, said the quake was the strongest since one of 7.6 magnitude struck in September 1999, killing around 2,400 people in the deadliest natural disaster in the island's history. Wednesday's magnitude 7.4 quake hit just before 8 a.m. local time, with the United States Geological Survey putting the epicenter 18 kilometers south of Taiwan's Hualien city at a depth of 34.8 kilometers. The National Fire Agency said all the fatalities had been in Hualien County. It said more than 1,000 people across Taiwan had sustained injuries without specifying how seriously. NATO foreign ministers yesterday debated the creation of a €100 billion 5-year fund for Ukraine as the alliance's chief urged them to guarantee long-term arms supplies for Kiev's outgunned forces. Officials say NATO's Secretary General has proposed creating a €100 billion fund to help arm Ukraine in its fight with Russia over 5 years. According to Jens Stoltenberg, the fund could help insulate the flow of weaponry to Ukraine following a potential return of Donald Trump to the White House after U.S. elections in November.
Every day of delay in a decision in the United States on providing more support to Ukraine has consequences on the battlefield. That's one of the reasons why the Ukrainians now have to ration ammunition and why they are struggling to keep up with the Russians, who are now able to outgun them with more weapons and more ammunition than the Ukrainians have.
The plan has support from Ukraine's staunchest supporters, such as Poland and the Baltic states. But other cautions, there are many questions on where financing would come from, and the plan could change dramatically by the time NATO holds its next summit in Washington in July. Meanwhile, Finland and Ukraine signed a long-term agreement on security cooperation during a visit by Finnish President Alexander Stubb to Kiev. Stubb also said Finland was delivering a €188 million package of military aid, including air defense and heavy ammunition, to Ukraine's army to help it win this war. In a 10-year agreement, the Nordic countries said it would continue to provide long-term military, political and financial support, as well as humanitarian assistance and civil protection support to Ukraine for as long as it takes. The deal, which is not a mutual defense pact or military alliance, is the latest in a succession of such commitments signed between Ukraine and its Western backers.
We have today given the 23rd aid package to Ukraine, a government decision that was taken last week. The 23rd package is €188 million of mostly military aid, and it does include air defense and heavy ammunition.
Stubb said at a press conference in Kiev that the latest package of support takes the total level of Finland's military aid to Ukraine to €2 billion since Russia invaded in February 2022. Georgia's ruling party said on Wednesday that it would reintroduce a repressive bill resembling Russia's foreign agent law to parliament, intent on passing a legislation that sparked mass demonstrations last year. The surprise announcement by the Georgian Dream Party came just over a year after it U-turned and dropped the bill under pressure from tens of thousands of protesters in Tbilisi. In a statement, the party said it had resubmitted the draft law that will be passed in all three hearings by the end of the current session of Parliament. The proposal denounced by the European Union, which Tbilisi aspires to join, would target NGOs, media organizations and individual journalists who receive foreign funding. It mirrors the Kremlin's foreign agent law that has been used to silence dissent. Georgian Dream said it had changed the wording of the law, saying these groups would now have to register as an organization pursuing the interests of a foreign power instead of an agent of foreign influence. The term foreign agent has Soviet-era connotations that suggest that such people are traitors and enemies of the state. Georgia's staunchly pro-Western President Salom Zurabishvili, who is at loggerheads with the ruling party, condemned the move as damaging Georgia's democracy and derailing the country from its European path. Thousands of supporters thronged India's most prominent opposition leader, Rahul Gandhi, during a campaign procession on Wednesday ahead of his formal nomination for national elections starting this month. The 53-year-old formally filed his nomination to recontest Wayanad with the local election office after the rally. Gandhi is the son, grandson and great-grandson of former Prime Minister, but has already suffered two landslide defeats against Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He is the leading figure in an opposition alliance, fighting an uphill battle in this year's polls against Modi, who remains broadly popular after a decade in power and is widely expected to comfortably retain office. But Gandhi was given a rousing reception in Wayanad, a picturesque town in the southern state of Kerala, with a huge crowd gathering to cheer his arrival. Gandhi was first elected to the constituency in 2019, but was briefly disqualified from parliament last year after his conviction for criminal libel in a case filed by a member of Modi's party. He was reinstated pending a Supreme Court appeal, but his decision to recontest the seat has caused some friction within the opposition alliance. His main challenges is a vibrant leftist Annie Raja of the Communist Party of India, a fellow member of the bloc. Nearly 1 billion Indians will vote to elect a new government in 6-week-long parliamentary elections starting on 19th April. Turkey's pro-Kurdish party on Wednesday said the country's election authority had reinstated a mayoral election winner in the eastern city of Van after clashes over the annulment of his victory. The DEM party's Abdullah Zaidan garnered more than 55% of the vote in Van and local elections on Sunday. But the Regional Electoral Commission claimed he was ineligible to stand due to a previous conviction and instead handed City Hall to a candidate from President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling Justice and Development Party AKP, who managed only 27%. However, the Supreme Election Board has since decided to give the certificate of election to Van Mayor Abdullah Zaidan. According to DEM, the move was a result of the resistance of the Kurdish people. The election board did not immediately confirm the decision. The Regional Commission's ineligibility decision followed the last-minute reversal of a court verdict that had restored Zaidan's right to stand for office. Zaidan, who was elected as an MP on the HDP ticket in 2015, was arrested and jailed in 2016 after criticizing the Turkish army's air campaign against outlawed Kurdish militants in the Kurdish majority southeast. He was released in 2022. Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye set out his main priorities in his address to the nation on the eve of Senegal's Independence Day. The left-wing Pan-Africanist has promised to take strong measures in the coming days to meet the needs of the Senegalese who are tired of the high cost of living.
The president reiterated his program for a sovereign, just and prosperous Senegal that he and his mentor Ousmane Sonko drew up, presented and defended together for the Senegalese people. He said it aimed to bring about lasting and structural change and sought to achieve a break with the past, progress and definitive change. Sonko set out his own position as the public authority in charge of coordinating and conducting the nation's policy in accordance with the constitution. Faye has said his priorities include fighting corruption and lowering the cost of living, as well as national reconciliation after years of turmoil. Faye, 44, was sworn in on Tuesday as Senegal's fifth and youngest president after sweeping to a first-round election victory on a promise of radical reform just 10 days after being released from prison.
South Africa's National Assembly Speaker Nosiwef Mapisa Kakula said on Wednesday that she was resigned from her position amid an investigation into alleged corruption during her tenure as Defence Minister. In a statement, she said her resignation is no way an indication or admission of guilt.
Mapisa Kakula's home was raided last month by investigators as part of the corruption inquiry, who did not provide details on the investigation or the allegations. Mapisa Kakula is accused of soliciting hefty amounts of bribes from a former military contractor during her previous tenure as Defence Minister. A member of the ruling party, the African National Congress, Mapisa Kakula's resignation comes as the party gears up to face a tough general election next month. The ANC praised Mapisa Kakula for protecting its reputation by stepping aside before being asked to do so. Ruling since 1994, the ANC battles allegations of corruption and nepotism, an ailing economy, dire unemployment, and an inability to keep the lights on, sure to affect performance of the polls.
Perus Congress yesterday granted a crucial vote of confidence to President Dina Boluarte's new cabinet, allowing it to proceed in office amid a scandal over the leader's luxury Rolex collection. The vote, which lawmakers passed with 70 in favour versus 38 against and 17 abstaining, gives the green light for Prime Minister Gustavo Adrianzan to move forward in his post, which he took up last month.
The vote came during a turbulent week in which 6 ministers resigned after a police raid on Boluarte's home and offices. In a speech that lasted nearly 2 hours, Adrianzan proposed an administration with clean hands, a transparent government to face corruption and inefficiency. Adrianzan was appointed Prime Minister in March to form Peru's third cabinet in 16 months after his predecessor resigned over a separate scandal in which he allegedly granted political favours to a love interest. If denied, Adrianzan and his cabinet would have been forced to step down, deepening the political turmoil in Peru, which has had 6 presidents in 8 years. The vote came as 61-year-old President Boluarte is being investigated for suspected illegal enrichment and failing to declare her luxury timepieces, a scandal dubbed Rolex Gate by the media.
More children denied aid in Gaza conflicts than more after this short break. United Nations official warned yesterday that a growing number of children caught up in armed conflicts around the globe are being denied access to critical humanitarian aid as relief operations come under attack or are blocked by governments.
UN Secretary General's Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict, Virginia Gamba, said that data gathered recently shows a trend of increasing incidents of denial of humanitarian access globally. Now, the last report by the UN Secretary General on the rights of children in conflicts, published in June 2023, recorded nearly 4,000 confirmed cases of aid being denied to children from Gaza to Yemen, Afghanistan, and Mali. She said last year's figure already represented an exponential increase since 2019. Cases of denial of humanitarian access are linked to the restriction of humanitarian activities and movements, interference with humanitarian operations and discrimination of aid recipients, direct and indiscriminate attacks on civilian infrastructure, disinformation and detention, violence against and killing of humanitarian personnel, and looting. She did not specify which countries would be singled out in the 2024 report set to be released this summer. Nearly half of the cases in last year's report, 1,861, were of Israeli forces denying aid to children in Gaza.
The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitors said on Wednesday that the death toll from an Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus this week had risen to 16. The raid destroyed the consulate annex of the embassy, with Iran's Revolutionary Guard saying 2 of its high-level commanders were among 7 of its personnel killed.
Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitor said the dead included 8 Iranians, 5 Syrians, and 1 member of Lebanon's Hezbollah militant group, all of them fighters. 2 civilians, a woman and her son, were also killed. The observatory said one of the dead, named a Brigadier General, Mohammad Reza Zahidi, had served as the leader of the Revolutionary Guard Corps Overseas Quds Force for Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. The Damascus strike was the 5th in a week to hit Syria, whose President Bashar al-Assad is supported by Iran, Israel's long-time arch foe. Hezbollah fighters have long been deployed in Syria in support of Assad's forces in his country's civil war. The Damascus raid came after another Israeli raid last Friday killed 53 people in Syria, including 38 soldiers and 7 Hezbollah members. According to the observatory, it was the highest Syrian army toll in Israeli strikes since the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza began on 7th October.
The International Committee of the Red Cross ICRC said yesterday that clashes between armed groups in Colombia have intensified and civilians are paying the price despite a variety of peace talks and ceasefires implemented by the government.
Head of the ICRC delegation in the country, Lorenzo Carafi, said despite the hope and optimism generated by the ongoing negotiations, the humanitarian situation has not significantly improved. Leftist President Gustavo Petro has sought to end 6 decades of conflict between the country's security forces, guerrillas, right-wing paramilitaries, and drug gangs as part of his total peace plan. Since 2023, he has been in talks with several of these groups, including guerrillas, who broke off from the Marxist group after it signed a 2016 peace deal. However, ceasefires with far-right paramilitary groups, the Clan de Golfo drug cartel, and the main FARC dissident faction have since faced suspensions by the government due to violence, particularly involving civilians. In 2023, the ICRC recorded 444 alleged violations of international humanitarian law in Colombia, including threats, sexual abuse, recruitment of minors, and the use of explosive devices.
Still to come, mighty Ghana's return to Premier League Summit. Stay with us. Arsenal coasted a 2-0 win over struggling Luton early this morning to dislodge Liverpool from the top of the Premier League table, once again edging ahead in a thrilling three-way title tussles. The result lifts Arsenal to 68 points, one ahead of Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, who host bottom side Sheffield United tonight.
Arteta's man with top scorer Bukayo Saka absent dominated possession in the opening stages at the Emirates, but created a few clear-cut openings in front of an expectant crowd. But they broke the deadlock in the 24th minute, courtesy of a sweet left-footed strike by captain Martin Odegaard. Arsenal doubled their lead in the 44th minute thanks to an own goal from Luton defender Daiki Hashioka, who turned into his own net following more good work down the left by Smith Rowe. The home side, playing in second gear, had just 3 shots on target in the first half, but were well worth their lead. The bulk of the second half was flat, although Luton came into the game more, probing for an opening to haul themselves back into the contest. The Gunners, who have not been crowned English champions since 2004, set the pace for the bulk of last season before flagging as the finishing line approached.
In another match, Phil Foden shone in the absence of Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne as the England's internationals' hat-trick handed Manchester City a thumping 4-1 win over Aston Villa. The champions responded empathically to questions over their ability to win the biggest games, to move to within 1 point of leaders Arsenal at the top of the Premier League.
Jeremy Doku was the creator for the opener as he skipped past Lucas Digne and his cross was swept high past Villa's stand-in goalkeeper Robin Olsen by Rodri. Jean Duran showed he is an able deputy to Watkins as the Colombian swept home a fine equaliser after exchanging a 1-2 with Morgan Rogers. City restored their lead just before half-time to calm the rising tension among the Etihad crowd thanks to Foden's first of the night. His free kick sneaked through a hole in the Villa wall. City's number 2 keeper Stefan Ortega made a vital save after the break to deny Villa levelling for a second time through Douglas Lewis. Foden made the points save when he swept in Rodri's pass off the inside of the post, and he completed his hat-trick in style by blasting into the top corner from outside the box. Guardiola's men have just one more match against a top 6 opponent away to Tottenham in their final 8 games of the season. Defeat leaves Villa still just 2 points above Spurs in the race for a top 4 finish, having played a game more.
On to tennis. Arthur Fils held firm in an emotional atmosphere on Wednesday at the Millennium Astral Open as the Frenchman triumphed 7-5, 6-4 against João Sousa to bring the home favourites' pro singles career to a close at the ATP 250.
The 19-year-old Fils converted 3 of 6 break points he earned for his 10th tour-level win of the season. He wrapped his victory in 1 hour and 50 minutes to send the 35-year-old Sousa into singles retirement. The number 37 in the PIF ATP rankings, Fils will now prepare for a maiden Lexus ATP head-to-head meeting with Christian Garin. The Chilean wrap-up rain-interrupted 7-6, 7-5 victory against Juric Radionov in a match that began on Monday evening in Portugal. In another game, Brazil's Fonseca and home favourite Henrik Roca were unable to join Fils in the second round as Jan Chojski overcame the 17-year-old 6-2, 6-7, 6-4 for his first ATP Tour victory. The Briton, whose only previous tour-level win came at Wimbledon in 2023, next faces second seed Hubert Hurkacz.
In Formula One, Max Verstappen is favoured to bounce back from his rare retirement in Australia and win this Sunday's Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Red Bull's triple world champion has won from pole on his last 2 visits to the figure-of-8 circuit owned by engine partner Honda, and both times by a considerable margin after a previous setback.
In 2022, when Suzuka returned after a 2-year absence following the COVID pandemic, Verstappen beat teammate Sergio Perez by 27 seconds for his second driver's title. He had finished only 7th in the previous race in Singapore, won by Perez. Red Bull's sole defeat of the season came in when Verstappen was 5th in a Singapore Grand Prix, won by Ferrari's Carlos Sainz. Now this time he turns up after suffering his first retirement since 2022, ending a run of 9 successive wins, with Sainz going on to win in Melbourne in a Ferrari 1-2 with Charles Leclerc. Suzuka's fast and flowing lines make it a very different challenge to the 3 races so far in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Melbourne. But the sinuous circuit could also play to Red Bull's strengths. The champions are also rumoured to be bringing a significant car upgrade, with attention focusing on aerodynamic modifications to the side parts. Ferrari have emerged as Red Bull's closest rivals, with Leclerc now only 4 points adrift of Verstappen.
Luis Rubiales, the disgraced former Spanish Soccer Federation RFEF chief, was informed by police on his return to Spain on Wednesday that he was a suspect in a corruption probe and told to appear before a local court. Rubiales, who has denied any wrongdoing, arrived in Madrid on a flight from the Dominican Republic, where he had spent 2 months on.
While Rubiales was abroad, a Spanish judge ordered searches of office and properties linked to a probe into alleged corruption, improper management and money laundering during his tenure as president of the RFEF. A Madrid court has been investigating since June 2022 whether Rubiales committed a crime of improper management when the RFEF agreed with a former Barca player Gerard Piqué's Cosmos firm to relocate the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia in a deal worth a reported 120 million euros. Police had searched the RFEF's headquarters outside Madrid and Rubiales' apartment in the southern Spanish city of Granada on 20th March, as well as a stadium in Seville, with 7 people have been arrested so far. Rubiales denied accepting bribes, and he said his earnings were a product of his work and savings. Now, in September, he resigned as RFEF president, and a month later was banned by FIFA from all football activities for 3 years for allegedly kissing player Jenny Hermoso on the lips without consent.
Singapore has decided not to make any bid to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games. The Straits Times reported the Commonwealth Games Singapore CGS and Sport Singapore Sport SG in a joint statement said they had studied the feasibility of hosting the event before arriving at the decision.
Commonwealth Games Federation CGF, during its General Assembly in November last year, has invited all member associations to express interest in hosting the 2026 Games. This is following the withdrawal of Victoria a few months earlier, claiming the estimated cost had blown out by 6.9 billion Australian dollar. Malaysia had previously rejected the CGF's offer, stating the decision was made at the cabinet meeting after considering all aspects of hosting the event and their implications.
All right, so that ends our bulletin today. Wrapping up with a recap of our top story. At least 9 dead in Taiwan's strongest quake in decades. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight, coming up at 8:30 p.m. on Saturn 1 and Berita RTM. From River to the Sea, Palestine will be free. I'm Berita Arifin. Stay tuned to TV2.